Hi, I'm Vasant. Almost 10 years ago, America experienced its first major sporting strike. The sport at the time was baseball. Attendance plunged over 20%, fans were angry, and it seemed that the following year nothing could be done. People were trying to give up on the all-American sport. But just then, young Mark McGwire and Sammy Sosa brought the sport back from its lowest point. McGwire went on to break several records, and very slowly, the fans started coming back to support their hero. What the fans didn't know, however, was that their hero was using performance-enhancing drugs. In 2010, Mark McGwire admitted to using PEDs. My major claim is that performance-enhancing drugs have a positive effect in American sports. I will support this claim with examples of current PED use that have stronger advantages over their side effects, and I will also present you with athletes that have prospered with the use of these drugs. And in my last claim, I will present you with how the people have indirectly prospered. The McGwire example is not an outlier. It has happened several more times throughout history, not to mention more recently. Consider the illegal use of steroids that have brought about legendary players like Alexander A-Rod Rodriguez and Ryan Brown. ESPN states that MLB players make an average of about $3.2 million a year, whereas Rodriguez was making close to $33 million a year. It is obvious that Rodriguez was paid so highly because he made the game more interesting, brought in larger crowds, and helped the Yankees benefit overall. He could not have done so without PEDs. The exact PEDs obviously were steroids, but PEDs categorize several other drugs as performance enhancing. Stimulants, narcotic analgesics, beta blockers, EPO, and THG are all drugs that deal with pain relief and muscle building. This brings me to my second claim. Athletes are faster, stronger, and recover quicker. These advantages outweigh the side effects of PEDs. EPO is a drug that boosts the number of blood cells. Dr. David Brown of the American Academy of Orthopedic Surgeons says that it is the most effective of the performance enhancers. Its side effects are that it increases your blood pressure and risk of getting a heart attack. There is no denial that these drugs have negative side effects, but if anybody should be expected to take these drugs, it should be those athletes that are in great shape and who are being paid millions to do what they do. An article in New York Times asks why it's okay for an injured football player to take a shot of Toradol to help ignore an injury, but not okay for him to take testosterone to help that injury heal faster. A really good example of someone who has done this and succeeded is Ray Lewis, formerly a linebacker for the Baltimore Ravens. He used 10 deer antler pills and a deer antler spray to recover from a tricep injury within 10 weeks, an injury that would have usually taken 6 months. Lewis made it in time for the playoffs and played some of the best game, with 44 tackles in three games. This is after a 10-week break. It isn't often that athletes come back from a break or come back from an injury and play a better game. My last claim is that athletes have achieved fame through the use of PEDs, which led them to be more philanthropic. A good example of that is Lance Armstrong, who founded the nonprofit Livestrong in 1997. He was cured of testicular cancer in 1998, around which time he started seriously biking again, which is when his fame really got out there. This was also the time that Livestrong took off. Lance Armstrong confessed to using the drug EPO on January 14th. But it is without a doubt that the effect Livestrong has had on cancer research has helped several people. This could not be possible without Lance Armstrong's popularity from his cancer battle, but more specifically from his fame and success in biking. Another great person is Arnold Schwarzenegger. Arnold successfully went into the acting career due to his fame from winning an unprecedented 5 Mr. Universes and 6 Mr. Olympia titles. Regardless of whether Arnold was successful politically, he did manage to entertain the American people in several movies throughout the 70s and 80s. Through all this, Arnold has supported close to 18 charities in his time as an actor and politician. He originally gained his acting roles and fame due to his enormous size, which he gained from using steroids. Back then it was legal. So. These are just but a few examples. I'm sure you could find a lot more if you were to go research online. PEDs are a moral and ethical hazard for many people to talk about. But with the given examples, I do hope that I've got my message across. PEDs have a positive effect on American sports and America. At the very least, their advantages outweigh their side effects. Thank you for listening to us.
All right, proposition's clear. The secondary points are labeled, although they are not always stated as claims, especially in the preview. And the supporting points, there are a couple of places also where I know what the issue is that you're talking about, but it's a little bit hard to tell what the inference is. It's clear there's going to be some controversy on this, although on the second point, I think there's a legitimate argument here to be made, but all that, the only proof that gets offered on that is somebody asking a question, why is one thing okay and the other thing not okay? I think that's the good start of an argument, but you ought to give us a clearer explanation about why the other thing ought to be okay, why it is in fact a little bit more beneficial, why it matters a little bit more. All of the examples that you present are largely uncited. I know that there's general knowledge that A-Rod was juicing, and that's not a problem there, and we know that Lance Armstrong has acknowledged that. That's big public news, but the question about how important that was to their performance, or for instance, like at one point you said A-Rod wouldn't have been making the money he had if he hadn't been using the performance-enhancing drugs. That sounds like an incentive for everybody to use the performance-enhancing drugs, and it sounds like the potential consequence of that is that you're going to have an arms race with PEDs, and that might be a little bit of an issue for other consequences. And there's not really much discussion of what those negative consequences are. You seem to acknowledge that they exist at the beginning of the speech, but never really talk about them during the rest of the presentation. The deer antler thing is an assertion. I didn't hear a source citation on that. I think that's a little bit problematic. And the thing in the third point about Lance Armstrong and Schwarzenegger, connecting it to the performance-enhancing drugs, I think is a bit of a stretch. It would be interesting to see how Livestrong is doing since Armstrong has acknowledged his cheating, and whether or not it has that same kind of effect on fundraising and that sort of thing. That, I think, will be one of the issues that will be talked about in the refutation speech. And I thought it was paced very effectively, and you have good audience contact, so that builds a lot of credibility too. All right.